And what is up? Hello everyone, this is your boy JakeyMattie with very much new content for each and every one of you. As for this vid, I am finally sharing my experience with all of you GL players in Opera Omnia, because next month will be a very special month. We are finally in the burst era. So yeah, this video will definitely, hopefully, help all of you out prepare for the next month, as we are about to enter a new stage called the burst era. Before we go on with our video, I just have two important things to very much say before we get started. First up, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below so that obviously you can subscribe to me and my channel. Another thing, the bell button to get notified if I get new videos for you, so you wouldn't miss a thing. And the second thing is my disclaimer with this vid. As I'm pretty much new in the content creation industry, I will have some lapses or like varying opinions with like mainstaying content creators here. If you have an open mind, please sound off below and do not be afraid to let me know if I am wrong, and then we can have a healthy discussion. Why did I say the things that I will say later on this vid? Capiche? With that being said, let's get right into it! Now we proceed with our very first question. What is the burst era and what separates it from the chaos era? You know, the answer is pretty simple. It's separated from the chaos era because it finally introduces two new weapons, the limited weapon and the burst weapon. I will explain later on this vid what each of the weapons do, but basically in context, that's why we are separating the chaos era from the burst era. But then again, there are still new things that you should expect in the burst era. The main difference is that, well, not really main, but in chaos stages, the chaos era will kind of have significantly, well, not really significant, we'll have enhanced stats from a normal chaos stage. The jump isn't as severe as it was from the Cosmos to the chaos stage, but you will notice a bit of an increase in stats for the enemies because normal EX plus units will eventually falter in terms of raw damage, which is why you would need the new weapons for your units to shine through this era. Maybe that's why like they're pushing so hard on the weapons, right? Because if they're introducing new weapons, might as well pull for it so you can finish content easier. But that does not mean that you cannot finish content without them, so you'll be perfectly fine. And another thing that will be new in this era is we'll have another special quest called a challenge quest. It's pretty much the same as a chaos quest because it is a chaos stage, but the only difference is you have to use synergy characters, and there are no friend supports. Not a single one. But that should be fine, right? No, because challenge quests will kind of like require you to pull, especially if you don't have like a full synergy team, because like most of the events only have 3 synergies, which of course the inclusion of the burst unit, so that's pretty much 4 in an event, so you would need 3 out of 4 to clear the challenge quest. And what does it give you? It gives you 1 burst medal, which when you accumulate up to 50, you can claim a free burst weapon of your choice. Now that isn't so hard, is it? It is, because the fact that you have to like wait for at least 5 to 6 months just so you can claim your very first free burst weapon is incredibly taxing. Because let's look at it this way. If you don't have a complete synergy team, you obviously need to pull on the banner just so that you can complete your team. And obviously like dump resources to purple or max, some of them like a new unit or 2, and then it just gives you 1 medal, and then you have to repeat it for like 50 total events, right? Till you get 50 medals just so you can claim your free weapon. Ugh. But obviously the challenge, I honestly recommend you to try to finish as much challenge quests as much as possible that you can, because if you're incredibly lucky and you pull duplicate burst weapons, then that's pretty much 5 tokens off the bat. Easy, if you manage to get a dupe, which is very hard because I'll be telling you later the rates that will happen on the new banners. And for the second part of the vid, we have, as I've mentioned earlier, the main reason why we're at the burst era is the inclusion of limited and burst weapons, or LD and BT for short. Now your question, which I will now answer: what are they? What do they do? Do I need them? How much do they cost? And all those other stuff. Let's get into it. Before I even explain both weapons, what do they do, how do they work, or any other stuff, I would just like to quickly share the new rates of the banners that we are getting from the burst era. The first, and I think the most important let's say update about the banners is that no more off banners. Yes, no more bot 15 CPs from your banners, no more Choco Blades, no more Furion 15 CPs randomly getting in your pools. So that's pretty much great. A second update is that you know how an orb flashes to the screen? The color of the orb is a guaranteed weapon that you're gonna get. Let's say for example a gold orb appears. It's not initially it used to be like a guaranteed 5-star weapon, but now if you get a gold orb in a pool, that will guarantee you an EX or an LD weapon. So if you get a gold orb during a pool, definitely be excited, as in heaps of excitement, because it's for sure a very special weapon. Because obviously you will get another orb tail, which is like a black rainbow orb with lightning zapping around it, which means that you obviously got the main prize, the burst weapon. And one last thing, the rate of getting an LD weapon will now be exactly the same as the rate in which you can get an EX previously. And I think the EX banner the chances of getting an EX weapon will now be significantly greater as how it used to be before, and the burst weapon will have a very measly percentage of acquiring it. You're flashing on the screen the actual rate, so bear that in mind, even though that you obviously may not memorize it, but just so you know that the LD weapons rate now is how the EX rate used to be, and then EX got up, burst is significantly low, don't even bother trying. That's basically it. And now, what is the limited weapon and LD weapon will be available for all of the units eventually, whereas the burst weapon is kind of like very restricted to protagonists and antagonists. My personal take is that the units in Dissidia and T will get the burst. I'm not sure yet if, let's say like Kane, Yuna, Tifa would get bursts, but if they do, then great. But as Square Enix have mentioned, they will be primarily focusing on protagonists and antagonists of getting a burst weapon. But everyone will eventually get an LD weapon down the line, so definitely pull for that. If you get an NT, if you get a burst weapon, then that's great, but just so you know that the burst weapons are a luxury at this point. I will be telling you later on this vid which burst weapons you can chase. Well, obviously you can chase for faves, right? I mean, definitely pull for faves, but there will be a few burst weapons that I personally think that if you get it, it will definitely make your life significantly easier. Now, onto the main juice. What are limited weapons and what could they do? Well, basically an LD weapon is an entirely third new skill for your units. I'm saying third because additional abilities or AAs or C65s does not count at all. So what this means is that an entirely third new skill that has 3 to 4 uses each is pretty damn big, because the special thing about these new skills, or like third skills, they're kind of like mini reworks for the units, as most of them add new utilities to the unit that they obviously previously did not have, but they need. You'll eventually realize it down the months as they go on. What do these LD weapons give them apart from additional auras? Like, let's say for example, Squall's LD has more auras for him that's giving him a whopping 120% attack value. Don't quote me on the actual percentage, I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's above 100, as well as Garland. But yeah, this is the reason why I said earlier in this vid how Chaos stages might get a slight ramp in stats, especially defense. This is because the LD weapon significantly gives the unit a higher edge than normally X plus units, because imagine like getting 100% attack just having a maxed LD weapon. I mean, the damage is pretty much insane. Like, a full unit with an LD weapon can easily cap damage again in the burst era rather than a normally X plus unit. So this is why I am telling you right now in this vid that the LD weapon is the true price of the banner, because if you want to use a unit, especially your DPS units, you definitely need their LD weapons so that they can see higher value to your runs. Because again, I've said before that you do not need an LD weapon to complete a stage, but having them will definitely make completing it significantly easier. Personally, I think the only units that you can use without an LD are supports, because you're using them for their utility and not for their damage. Therefore, using supports in the burst era, even though they don't have LD weapons, is still great on its own, because additional buffs and strong kit utilities like Enchant, Imperil, HP Silence will definitely help your team along the way. And finally, the burst weapon. Again, as I've said a few minutes ago, only protagonists and antagonists will get a burst weapon. So if you ever think about Yang getting burst, don't even bother thinking about it. So it's just the main character and the main villain. Again, I've also said that there is a slightest possibility of including NT units, but don't quote me on that. This is just my observation, my opinions. A guy can have his opinions, right? But yeah, so what the burst weapon does is it gives the unit another button called the burst phase. It's like a black icon with like lightning zaps as its borders. So what happens in the burst phase, it is a special summon-like phase for the unit itself. So you know how in the summon phase you can get 6 free turns, that doesn't for everyone in the team, right? Well, the burst phase is kind of like that, with the only exception of it's only the burst unit that can use its skills and turns in it. Another thing to note during burst phase is the unit will have a skill each and its EX immediately activated that you can use anytime. So you can practically just have a use of each of their skills, and then all of their effects are still the same. And at the very end, at the 6th turn in the burst phase, we will have what we call a burst finisher, where it's this very flashy animation that has uncapped Brave and HP damage, although at a certain value. Usually it'll vary from 15 to 25% Brave damage, and the HP cap ranges from about 180,000 to, let's say, 300,000 if it's single target. But for AoE damages, it's usually 180 to 200k. So not bad, right? And then at the end of the burst phase, there's a big flashing number that will tell you how much damage you have dealt during the burst phase. And after that, the unit will have a party-wide buff labeled B below the unit, which obviously stands for burst. And this burst buff varies per character, and it would last usually 3 to 5 turns. But there are some cases where the aura goes up to 6, and a very handful of units can go up to 10 turns of the burst buff. What the burst buff does, it's entirely unique to each of the character, and it's a great help, although not very much. What the burst buff does is unique to very unit, because it adds another level of utility for the team that you can use to burst down your enemies to easily complete the fight. Another thing to note about burst weapons is that you can only use one burst phase in the entire run. So let's say you have a team with all of them having burst weapons, you can only use one burst phase. After that, the other ones who have burst weapons can no longer activate them. However, if you are doing co-op, everyone can use burst phases, even though you're the same team of squalls, like 3 squalls. Then go for gold, all of you can use your bursts, no problem about that. Also, another thing, if you are bringing a friend support with the burst weapon, and you click his burst skill or her, only the burst finisher will immediately be activated, so the friend unit will not go to the burst phase like you normally do, like a summon phase or like a normal burst phase for a unit. The friend support will just go straight directly to the finisher and then grant you the buff for the remaining duration of your friend support. Now the final question for this segment, if you have a limited and a burst weapon at the same time, what is the hierarchy of weapons that you can equip for your unit? Well, one can easily immediately assume that the stats of a limited weapon is higher than the maxed EX plus. But here I am telling you that it's wrong. You can only equip your limited weapon if you have not maxed your EX plus. So in terms of stats, the burst weapon is obviously the priority to equip, and then after that, the EX plus weapon, and then the LD weapon, and then the EX weapon. So basically, if you have a purple unit with the maxed LD, you can just pretty much sell the limited weapon as soon as you max it. Don't ever bother like thinking about an LD plus weapon or something like that, because there's something in the future that will be beneficial for the LD skill. So yeah, you can only sell your EX plus if you get the burst weapon of the character. Before we end our segment, I just have a few Q&As that I think that you're gonna ask that I have an answer to. If I don't, you can just sound off below if you have further questions that I may have missed, and we can just talk about it. The first thing is, how does the meta shift in the burst era? Because you know how Global loves meta units and preparing for the future with the foresight and all that. But this is me telling you that the meta will obviously lean towards units with LD weapons, but that being said, if you want to skip on some banners, then that's totally fine. But I would say you can only skip the banner if you have all of the synergy units for the challenge quests and you feel like you can complete the challenge quests with the resources that you currently have. Because obviously the 1 burst medal per challenge is very important to get a free burst weapon. So if you want to save, like let's say on a future banner that you want to chase a burst from, that is fine, but as much as possible I would recommend chasing at least the LD weapon of the featured character in the banner, because as you chase the LD weapon, I'm pretty much sure that you'll get the other EX weapons along the way should you need them for the challenge quests. The second question that I thought you were gonna ask me is, which banners should I save my resources on? As I said minutes ago, if you have all of the synergy units in the banner, then skipping the banner is totally fine. But I would honestly again recommend that you should like spend a few tickets if you have them for the limited weapon of the banner, because you would mostly need it to complete the challenge quests, because the extra utility and damage and auras of the unit will incredibly help you to make the challenge quest significantly easier. And my final question for this segment, which I'm pretty much sure that you're gonna ask, is notable banners. Which banner should I spend my resources on? In this context, I will just go for the first 3 months of the burst era, because the 4th month onwards is kind of like the future of the burst era, which is I will tease later, but enough of that. So if you meant to chase units for the first 3 months of the burst era, I would recommend Omnia, which is pretty much the first character event that has an LD weapon. due to the fact that Amiditalian just deletes turns. If you were to see her in action in JP vids, she's insane. Like, her deletion of skill is greater than Quistis's delay or like General Leo, so Amiditalian is definitely the best LD unit for the first 3 months that I will recommend. And in terms of burst weapons, I would recommend the 2 units from Final Fantasy 15, Noctis and Ardyn. Noctis primarily because he can finish stages in just 1 turn. How and why? That's for you to find out. And last but not the least, Ardyn, because he is unkillable. I mean, he can't be killed in 15, so how can you kill him in Upper Omnia? Well, that's all that I have for you in my burst preparation guide. I will have future videos coming up which will explain in detail which units and other stuff like that to help you guide yourself throughout the burst era. And I'll just tease as well that I have mentioned before that kind of like this vid is just valid for the first 3 months of the era, because after 3 months, on the 4th month, you shall be expecting lots of new things, namely the Lufenia era, Crystal level 80, Divine Summons Act 3, and the likes. So stay tuned for more vids in detail. This is JakeyMattie signing off.